I don't know much but to face that beast, make them taste that peace. I'ma take back streets, I'ma meet bad beasts on some Maybach seats. I'm a day past east, so I might go west. I feast in the night when the light go rest. Nights on my feet, gold Christ on my neck. I hope life leads me to a nice old death. Rose on my lip, cold ice on my breath. And I'm dressed like a groom, but I never got mad. Walked out the tomb like I never got bad. Call me Wallace Dean, I'm waking out of dreams. I got death on my breath, call me Holocene. I got Greek in my speech when I speak to the God. Rims on the bends on the beach with your broad.
Era. After 53 years as pharaoh, first as co-regent with Queen Hatshepsut, and then in his own right, Tuthmosis III was interred in the tomb specially prepared for him in the Valley of the Kings near Thebes, present-day Luxor. Tuthmosis was the greatest pharaoh of the 18th dynasty who secured the Egyptian empire from Syria in the north to Nubia in the south. It is generally thought that his tomb was rapidly painted while his body was being mummified. Despite this fact, it is one of the most important tombs in the valley. The burial chamber contains the first completely preserved text of the am-tuat to be painted in a royal tomb. The am-tuat is the first coherent text to describe the journey of the sun god Re through the 12 hours of the night. It is painted directly onto the plaster wall in a style reminiscent of a papyrus scroll in cursive hieroglyphs, red and black, and deceptively simple line drawings. The hours are separated by vertical lines of text and divided into 3 horizontal bands or registers. The solar bark, the boat in which the sun god is traveling, is usually situated in the middle band with additional information relevant to each hour in the top and bottom lines. Due to space limitation, this regular pattern is sometimes disrupted. The dotted pink sections represent desert and the blue zigzag lines water. The ceiling is covered with a regular grid of stars. The term am-tuat means that which is in the netherworld. It generally characterizes all illustrated books describing the sun god's nocturnal journey and his rejuvenation each morning. Its actual title is The Treatise of the Hidden Room, and it is the earliest book of this kind which served as a model for an entire literary genre to which the Book of Gates and the Book of Cavans also belong. The lengthy introductory passage emphasizes the knowledge that the text will transmit, providing an overview of the contents. The text describes the sun god's journey through the 12 hours of the night. The words and deeds of the god are in the center of the am-tuat, along with a description of all the beings in the netherworld, their functions, and the magical spells required for a safe trip. The actual location of the underworld is inside the body of Nut, the goddess of the sky. She gives birth to the sun each morning. It then travels along her body by day, entering her mouth at sunset before traveling back through the inside of her body to be born again the next morning. The am-tuat is a complex narrative mixing myth and magic, realism and fantasy, poetry and science.
Building pyramids needs a lot of science. So there was from the beginning a very important natural science in Egypt too. And here in the New Kingdom we have a certain science of the beyond developed, but in a not only scientific but also poetic way. It's a vision too, and here we have a connection to the psychology again.
Absolutely, and I would also say that the fact that it is so well structured, and you even have a summary in the end, like in a scientific publication with an abstract, really shows that need for distilling the essence of some great vision out and to bring it together. And the amazing thing that it was really for the beyond. It was not made for tourists. It was really sealed afterwards, and it was hidden knowledge, so to say, a knowledge that only with the centuries is now emerging into something that we can also understand.
We start in the west, because the sun is going down in the west, and so we have the first 4 hours in the west, and then changing to the south with the 5th and 6th hours, going to the north with the 8th and 9th hours, and the rest is on the east wall, because sunrise takes place in the east, naturally.
The amazing thing is that they built this tomb in the depth of the mountain and had to orient it somehow. And I was really surprised at one time when I was standing at the head of the sarcophagus and had my compass with me, and I was trying to see where is now east and where is west and north. I realized that the rising sun in the 12th hour was exactly east of the head of the sarcophagus.
The first hour is a kind of intermediate realm between this world and the other, showing just some of the most important beings involved in this process of the nocturnal journey of the sun god. Most conspicuous, the baboons greeting the sun when coming down. The goddesses of the hours, at the end of the upper register, who are guiding the sun god through the 12 hours of the night, or a choice of the serpents, the many serpents who inhabit the other world, we see represented in the lower register. And from the hands risen, we see that there is a general jubilation during this first hour of the night.
Knowledge is good for the dead, but it is also said it's good for the living, a remedy 1,000,000 times proven. And this was really something that hit my soul, because I could realize that it is really some knowledge that when we are getting acquainted with this knowledge, it has some very strange and amazing quality of healing, because it is really that knowledge that we need to have for this other world that we would call today the unconscious, the knowledge that there are demons, that there are also helping forces, and to know these forces is giving a certain confidence that one can travel through the night and that one can really connect to the rejuvenating forces of the unconscious.
The universal character of this sun god represented in many different images, not only in the one standing in his bark. And then at the end of the first 3 hours, we have very long texts used as division to the next hour too. And these long texts, which we miss in the later hours, they are telling the dialogue between the sun god and the beings of this hour. The second hour is called Berness and is filled with water. It's a very fertile region where the blessed inhabitants of the other world get everything they need, all alimentation and plenty of water and the breath of life and so on, so stressing the positive aspects of the other world. In the upper register starts with the goddess Ma'at, so she continues from the first hour, where we had her double representation, into the next hour to show the permanence of Ma'at in the other world.
Ma'at is present at the start of the am-tuat. She is the goddess of divine order, truth and justice, and her presence throughout the dangerous journey ahead is essential for the triumph of order over chaos, light over darkness. Her symbol is the ostrich feather, against which the souls of all mankind are judged. Those whose heart is heavier than the feather are doomed to oblivion. Here in the second hour, her feather is seen in one of the boats.
And another carries a symbol of Hathor, the important goddess of regeneration. And the last boat carries a symbol of the moon. The moon is not very present in the am-tuat, but of course is very important too for the hope of regeneration, because the moon fades away. Hathor and the moon have in common that they both are seen as eyes of the sun god. Hathor as the right eye and the moon as the left eye of the sun god. Another peculiar feature are the two serpents in the boat of the sun god, which are quite unusual because we don't meet them in the other hours. The names written over them, it's Isis and Nephthys. From the second to the third hour, the fertile region continues. We again have plenty of water in this hour, and here it's called the waters of Osiris. So here we are really now in the realm of Osiris, the ruler of the dead, and he is represented several times in the lower register, partly with Upper Egyptian crown, partly with Lower Egyptian crown, and the two last figures are the stellar aspect of Osiris, because he was seen as the constellation Orion in the sky. So he's ruling not only in the underworld, but also in the sky. And the peculiar thing is the omissions. Sometimes figures or heads are omitted in this part of the am-tuat, and only in Tuthmosis III, and we still don't really know the reason of these omissions. In the other half of the middle register, we have some beings bowing very low to the ground. That's a gesture of humiliating, of submission before the two eyes of the sun, which are held by this goddess. The eye has a very complex myth in ancient Egypt. You have the story of the struggle of Horus and Set, where Horus, with a falcon head, was injured in his eye. And so the eye has to be restituted again.
We all of a sudden come in the desert area where the sun god has to rely on a snake boat that has on the prow and the stern a snake head, and where the darkness is overcoming, and he can only address the figures of this hour, or the gods of this hour, by just a one-way traffic, so to say. He calls them, but he can't hear them.
When we come to the desert of the god Zokar, where we have no water at all, and come in a completely dark region populated by a lot of serpents, partly with human legs and with wings. So it's really a desert region, and this illustrates the Egyptian notion, sometimes expressed verbally, that every being, all gods and all human beings and all animals, have to go down to this underworld to participate in a new life, and the sun god is responsible for them all, for the general fate of death. This chamber, and the text written beside, now a little destroyed, says that Tuthmosis here is leaving the underworld and going out again into this world. That means, of course, in the morning he joins the sun god with reappearing in this world, or his bar is free to move around and to go to the heavens again. And above, his main wife, Meritra, is also shown it seemed that she was still alive when the tomb was constructed, and she is shown accompanying him. And here in the fifth hour, we have a first union of the sun god with Sokar, who is identical with Osiris, then in the oval of Osiris, of Sokar, crowned by the head of Isis. And it's perhaps important to stress that this oval form is again the form of the burial chamber of Tuthmosis. In the fourth hour, we entered the desert land of Sokar, and this continues in the fifth hour. This is a representation of the whole nightly realm. So the scarab is coming out in the morning, out of this underworld. But most important is the oval below, with the falcon-headed god Sokar, standing and grasping the wings of a multi-headed snake, which seems to be an aspect of the sun god. So we have here a first reunion of the sun god with Osiris, because Sokar is just a form of Osiris too.
Here down below in this world of Sokar, we have for the first time the coming together of the sun god Re in the form of the snake, that is called actually also the multicolored snake, and Sokar as a form of Osiris. And so here for the first time these two opposites, or these two parts of the same reality, are joined together, and that this is really a remarkable hour, and the prominent hour is then further confirmed by the fact that we have in the boat itself the sun god already for the first time again with the sun disk that is surrounded by the Ureo snake, that his eye or his protective snake has for the first time come back. But it's only for a first time. It will be lost again in all the other hours, to come back only in the 11th hour to the boat and in the 12th hour on his head again.
Gates in the underworld are usually protected by serpents. So we have the door here at the end of the lower register, again protected by a serpent. So before we enter into the next hour and come to the primeval ocean noon, we have to overcome this last obstacle. In the sixth hour, this desert region ends again. We come into the noon, the primeval ocean, so again plenty of water. And since we are now approaching midnight, we have here the most important union of the sun god as a bar soul with his body lying there in a protection of a multi-headed serpent. And it's remarkable that the corpse of the sun god is not represented as a mummy, but here as a normal body, but crowned by the scarab, already hinting at the outcome of this nocturnal journey and the transformation into the scarab in the morning.
So these 16 divine pharaohs, they would represent the whole past of the deceased Tuthmosis III. Mm-hmm. And that is, one could say, the cultural heritage or the whole energy of the ancestors that is addressed by the sun god on the one hand side, and they are on the other hand also supporting that renewal process. And that is also something we know very well, that the continuation of culture depends whether we understand our ancestors and are able to reconnect with the knowledge of past generations.
And the eyes of the sun god are also present here in the middle, held by this goddess and protected by the baboon-headed god Thoth, who always is healing the injured eye. Since this is a moment of danger, we are confronted in the next hour, in the seventh, with Apophis, the arch enemy of the sun god, confronting the sun bark and trying to stop its course, but he is overcome and fettered and hacked to pieces, so the sun god can continue in his boat.
This Apophis would be that what we could really understand as that what we can't control, this autonomous, overwhelming anger, overwhelming jealousy, overwhelming all these forces that are so strongly inhibiting our own process, our own development, or our own renewal.
So serpents can be threatening and dangerous, or protective and helping. So here we have Apophis as a great enemy of the sun god in the form of a serpent, but we have Osiris in the protection of the Mechan snake and the sun god himself. And at the end of the upper register, we have Atum, also protected by a serpent.
We could see that after the seventh hour, that has been really the encounter with this demonic force, this is Apophis snake. We have here still not yet a flowing, as we will have it in the ninth hour, but still the sun god is towed, now with 8 figures that are pulling this sun god still.
The 8th hour has a very regular structure. In the upper and lower register, we see 10 caverns, or 5 in each register, 5 caverns, closed by doors. That means the doors are already opened, because when the sun god calls to these beings, the doors open. In every cavern, we have deities sitting on a hieroglyph, which is a hieroglyph for clothing. Because in this hour and in the next, the 9th hour, the subject is procuring of clothing in the other world. And the text describes now that the sun god, when approaching, is calling out to these beings, and they answer him from their caverns, not they themselves, but their against their bar souls, they answer. And what is heard is not a human voice, but it's the crying of animals or sounds of nature. For instance, banging on metal, or humming of bees, or crying of birds, and bellowing of bulls, or crying of tomcats. And in front of them, here at the end of the register, we see 4 rams, called the rams of Tar-Chenan. This is another god of the earth, of the depth of the earth, but at the same time also aspects of the sun god. And we have here the beginning of a development, at the end of which, at the end of New Kingdom, we have the sun god represented as a god with 4 ram heads on one neck.
Now here in the 9th hour, this flow that really starts to move, and we have in this way also all the figures that are looking now towards the east, and this is the first hour that is now painted also on the east wall, as it is said in the text. And from here on up to the 12th hour, we have really now this drive on this intense yearning to get the process till the rebirth going.
In the 9th hour of the night, the painter had again to respect the door of one of the side rooms, and here he was faced with some difficulty. So as a result, we have a wild mixture of the scenes. For instance, the boat of the sun god put on top, belonging to the middle register usually, and the court of judges, belonging to the upper register, squeezed into the lower one. By the way, the notion of the judgment of the dead is very important in all these New Kingdom books. But the main subject of this 9th hour are the oarsmen of the solar boat. Usually they are marching before the boat in the middle register, but here they are distributed over all 3 registers because of lack of space. So we find some of them in the upper and some in the middle register and some in the lower even. Besides, we have once more 12 fire-spitting oreo snakes, which have always 2 tasks: to keep away the enemy powers from the sunberg and to illuminate the darkness.
After the 9th hour, we come to the 10th hour, where really then also the restoration of the eyesight or the restoration of new consciousness can take place. And it is important to know for all these abbreviated hours that this knowledge of these hours is not only good for the deceased, but also for the humans on earth, for the living, because it is said it is a remedy 1,000,000 times proven.
We have again the important motive of the 2 eyes of the sun god, the left eye and the right eye, which are injured by going down to the world of the dead, but are healed again. And responsible for this healing is mainly the baboon-headed Tot, sitting in the middle of the register and holding this holy eye, the Ujat eye. Ujat means complete eye, and he is helped by figures of Sekhmet, with lion head and with human head. Sekhmet is a goddess who sends the diseases, but who can heal also the diseases, and so she is responsible also for healing the solar eye. The 10th hour is concerned with the fate of those who do not get an ordinary burial, but they are shown floating in the primeval ocean Noon, but coming by this ocean into the underworld and being rescued by the sun god and getting everything they need in the underworld. And this is the answer to the question heard very often: what happened in ancient Egypt to all the simple people who were not mummified and got no real burial like the kings and the high officials and so on. So the Egyptians saw this problem already too, and they had this solution that all are coming in the underworld and are cared for by the gods there, and so all could have their happy afterlife. We are already approaching sunrise of the morning, and so we have as a first important subject the question of time. For the sun god, it's very important not to miss the right time for his reappearance in this world. And so in the beginning of the upper register, we see a double-headed figure, with the sun disk, so as again as an image of the sun god. And the double head points to the two notions of time. In ancient Egypt, we have two expressions for time, nechach and jet, one more dynamic and one more static. And the next figure, complex figure shows again the sun god as Atum, grasping the wings of a serpent and having the two eyes above. So here is a moment of the correct grasping of time for the rebirth in the morning and the restitution of the eyes combined with this rebirth. And then another complex figure shows time in the form of a serpent. This was a very favorite aspect for the Egyptians, to imagine time as a huge serpent out of which the hours are born and afterwards swallowed again by this serpent. The most important in the middle register is a huge serpent carried on the head of the 12 gods marching before the solar boat. And in the solar boat itself, we have already the sun disk on the prow of the boat, hinting to the coming reappearance of the sun in the east in the 12th hour. And this huge serpent carried is called the world encircler, whom we met already in the 8th hour in one of the caverns there, but there he was not yet in action. But now he is put into action, which will follow in the 12th, the last hour, because he represents the rebirth of the sun god and all his following.
One could say it is not yet touching ground of reality. It is just something one has to carry through till it can finally enter into reality. And that is really also something we experience in the process of a renewal of a personality, that for quite a period things are kept in suspension till they are ready to be realized and to enter reality.
So then in the 12th hour, all beings are marching through the body of the huge serpent of the world encircler, entering as old men and very weak ones, and coming out of the mouth of this serpent, reborn and rejuvenated. So this means the end of the 12 hours journey. All beings are reborn, are refreshed in the new morning. Cycle goes on, and that's the point here. We have the end of the nocturnal journey, the sun disk pushing through the desert to again into this world and being lifted by the god Shu up to heaven. So it's the end of this cycle, but it's very apt that in this tomb we have immediately following the 5th hour of the am-tuat, starting with the goddess of the west. It's not Ma'at here, she has a feather as Ma'at, but she's the goddess of the west. And so the next cycle, when the god goes to the west and goes down again in the west, is immediately following. It's an eternal continuation, one cycle after the other, no end to it. And that's the hope for every dead person, that the cycle will continue eternally, including himself. And not by chance, the text here above the hour ends with a very short sentence that the king Tuthmosis III, the king buried here, knows it. And it means all the phenomena of the other world. He is the one knowing everything which is important for his afterlife.
On my neck, I hope life leads me to a nice old death. Rose on my lip, cold ice on my breath. And I'm dressed like a groom, but I never got mad. Walked out the tomb like I never got bad. Call me Wallace Dean, I'm waking out of dreams. I got death on my breath, call me Holocene. I got Greek in my speech when I speak to the God. Rims on the bends on the beach with your broad. If the dough get low, I paint a pit 16. I catch the Holy Ghost, then I spit 16.
Litanies are like epiphanies. Lit to me like a symphony. In Basilica, this literature is like jewelry made by Tiffany's.
Call me Rosie Gold, I got holy